Welcome back, gamers, to the only show that actually helps you win. Except for the dice. We bring you another episode of Tactics Talk, where Ed Sales and Austin Copeland go over what makes them such great Flames of War players. Now, introducing our hosts, Ed and Austin. You're gonna like the way they tactic. We guarantee it.
Well, thanks, Sean. As always, your succulent voice is the thing that gets me through the day. And welcome back to another episode of Tactics Talk, the only show on the internet where myself and Ed Sales are going to do whatever we can to make you better. Ed, how have you been? It's been a few days since we've recorded.
Man, a few days. It's been a few weeks. You know, work schedule, tournament schedule, and the holidays have really gotten in the way, and a busted up computer. But glad to be recording again.
I know for everyone who can't see Ed right now, he sent me a picture. He's basically recreated the deep web right now, and he has wires coming out of his attic, it's just ridiculous. But he's here, he's recording, and we're going to get in our recap as promised, as well as the Ferdinand and how to use it effectively, which was requested by some of our listeners. So we're here, we're doing our job, and Ed, speaking of Fallen, you won Fallen. What did you do? How did you get there?
Fallen, I was really surprised that I won Fallen. I decided to take my Italian L640 and German armor car formation. And I would say the matchups that I got, the armies I faced, really kind of helped lead the way to victory. My first game was against Howard West, and he had a Strikolvi company.
Ooh.
And he had a really fun card. He was using the Fresh from the Factory card.
Ah, so we finally see someone using the Fresh from the Factory card.
Yep, saw someone use it, and I was going against it. But his Strikolvi was very immobile. A lot of infantry, a platoon of 76 guns, and a platoon of the 122 guns. And he chose defend, I chose maneuver, and got counterattack.
Ooh. You know, you say immobile infantry, but there's just something about seeing that many machine gun tanks. And I would be hard-pressed to make my infantry run across the table as well.
Yeah, and I was fielding 19 L640s and all the armored cars. It's a lot of machine guns with infantry. They're going to have to get up and move to an objective that's in no man's land with counterattack.
Now, was he using the Soviet infantry that have the 4-up save, or was he doing it, playing it safe and using a hero company?
I believe it was the 4-up save company.
Oh, man. Howard's a brave man. You know, I've played him several times, and he's not a bad player.
Nope.
How did that game go for you?
Well, I've split my L640s in half, and was going after to surround the objective of no man's land to cover it from infantry coming on it. And with the other objective, I just assaulted it over and over at the L640s. And the 3 turns we played, he got 1 T-34, and my 5 Semivantes wiped it out in the first turn it came on. It was bailed out, and I ended up assaulting the objective that was in his deployment area and just took it.
Well, I'm going to have to wait and see the great Fresh from the Factory winning deck still, I guess. So how'd your second game go?
Second game was against Larry Chaban, and he brought American rifles, just a plain old American Rifle Company. I was really surprised to see that. I chose attack, and he chose maneuver, and that led us to, again, playing the counterattack mission. His American rifles were pretty much what you expect to see. It did have M10s and Lees, which, you know, my list lacks some real AT in it. I put a small force together of 2 L640 platoons and a KV to push on the one objective who's defending, and everything else dashed towards the objective of no man's land. And I did the same thing. I just essentially put a circle around it while using some of the L640s to make sure that his infantry didn't want to get up and head towards the objective. And when his reserves came on, the M10s and his 3rd Rifle Platoon they focused so much on the martyrs that weren't near the objective that I was able to surround the objective, killed the M10s, and his infantry was not going to be able to come up and rush and assault my L640s off, so I ended up winning the game.
So we've talked a little bit about the L640, and now you've mentioned 2 games where you had not like perfect matchups. So I'm not going to say M10s were a perfect matchup for you, but we've noticed that against an infantry formation, time and time again, and we can talk about Masters here in a little bit, where someone ran in one of these as well. Against infantry, what is there that infantry can do against this? Because it's beginning to look like a ridiculous list right now.
Bazookas and PTRDs, and hope you don't get penned. Really, I really don't. I really don't know. I haven't planned how you would beat this with an infantry list. This list is built to shred infantry. I guess if you were Germans, you could use a lot of the Pack 36s, so Pack 38s. If you're Brits, you can load in a lot of the 6-pounders. It really is a tough task, in my opinion, to do.
So I've been doing some thinking about this because I watched this game and then your third game we'll talk about here in just a moment. And just seeing how ridiculously effective they are against infantry, it took me, my mind started thinking, what would you think about infantry commanders that spare 20-ish points for their own light tanks? For the Brits, that would be Honey Stewarts or Crusaders, the cheap AT-7 Crusaders. For Germans, a few points for PZ-3s. Americans, more Stewarts, just a light tank. Because I was thinking, you're only running AT-5. You have some AT-8, that can sit back and throw shots at you. But would a light tank really slow you down that much? Like, just a good solid, 10 to 14 light tanks?
I think Stewarts would seriously be an issue for me. Even Crusaders. If I take 2 L640s against a Stewart, I'm not liking my chances, to be honest.
I was going to say, honestly, in that matchup, I'm seeing 2 dead L640s. Like, with that AT-5, especially against something, the Crusader can be front armor 4. So, and side armor 2, that's a 3-up save. That's an infantry save, effectively, if you think about it. So, with everything put together, everyone I know is starting to see this armored car and L640 formation as a real threat. But I think a really effective way to stop it might be save some points, run your infantry formation, but be sure you save some points for a mobile portion for your army. And that mobile portion is going to be anything with AT-7, effectively. So whatever tank that equates for your nationality. Save that 25 points for that formation.
Yeah, I would agree.
So anyway, sorry for the digress there, but just a little bit of tactic in our tactic talk. And then game 3, I thought you and I were going to be playing each other, but it didn't shake out that way.
Yeah, honestly, I really thought there was going to be me and you game 3. We had actually set ourselves up on the same table, and Mitch came over and goes, "Oh man, I'm sorry. This guy's got 2 8-1s, so Ed, you're going to be playing him." And it's like, it would have made a great storyline. The two of us on this podcast playing each other. I'd have to say I was a bit relieved when it did not work out that way, though. Well,
your relief was short-lived because I do believe that game gave you a run for your money.
For a little bit. I played against Tyson Swagger, and I played against the Pittsburgh trifecta had fallen. And I played Rich Bear earlier that tournament for Team Yankee. So I really got the whole quartet. But in all seriousness, Tyson brought DAC Africa Corps Germans, the rifles. He took the small platoons. He was able to get Martyrs, Dianas, and it's a trick that I've seen a few people use where they, in the reserves, is one very big platoon. So for Germans, what you do is you get a bunch of Panzer IIIs, you upgrade them to make it worth the entire amount you have to put in reserve.
Hmm.
And it's really smart. It's not a tactic that I personally like to do, but I've seen it really work well for some people.
It is a good tactic. That's usually how I try to do my reserves. I usually try to do it with M10s, whether that be 3 or 4 M10s. If I drop that dice and it comes up a 5, I don't have to worry about rolling that dice a second time.
And he also had 2 Pack 38s, or the 5-centimeter tank gunners is what they're called now. He chose defend, and I chose attack. And we ended up with Bridgehead. Mm-hmm. And Bridgehead is a very strong mission for me with my list, because I get the scout and the spearhead.
Yes.
So he deployed his Dianas in short terrain, and he kept his Martyrs in ambush with the big Panzer III platoon in reserve. I used the spearhead to extend the deployment area as much as I could, which essentially means I can start completely on your side. And I had the 2 platoons of L640s and the 1 armored car platoon on the left. On the right side, he had set all of his minefields, so I had to sludge it through a forest to go through a 1-inch gap to fit my tanks through. So I put the L640s, infantry, and some more armored cars over there. And in the center, I'd placed the KV, the Simivantes, and the Martyrs, just waiting to pounce. And on the center right, I had another L640 platoon. When the game started, I blitzed the L640s and armored cars forward, and was able to kill all the Dianas. Since I was at elevated terrain, I eliminated his concealment in short terrain. Mm-hmm. So that was a painful lesson that he learned there.
The hard way.
Yeah, because once I knocked those Dianas out, that's, checking the box of knocking out your AT, because I got to knock out your AT so I can get my L640s moving. I dropped templates on his Pack 38s, and nothing, didn't affect them one bit.
That 3-up save is an amazing thing for gun teams.
Yes, it is. And the 4-up firepower is not too good on the Simivantes or Nebs. I moved my L640s through the forest and through the gap, and then he dropped his ambush. His ambush fired at my L640s, 8 shots, killed 2.
That's not good enough.
Failed 1. No, it's not. And other than that, it was generally did not have enough effective shots to go against me.
So something I noticed when watching that game, because my game, we'll get to my game 3, which lasted about 5 minutes. I noticed as I kept walking over, his infantry just would not give up an inch of ground. What was he doing where his infantry just were not moving?
Good dice rolls. They were deployed well in a situation where they were able to provide fire. If any of them were assaulted, they were in range to provide covering fire or supportive fire all the way around. And that included his AT rifle, which really was the only thing that could really cause me to panic. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it was just good deployment of his infantry. So that if one was assaulted, the AT rifle was able to provide shots.
So you're saying basically the only thing that really kept your horde back was a good deployment of infantry, and it is true. If you can set up your infantry in the right way, you can hold off a lot of attack, because you can mitigate the amount of hits you're going to take in that first round of assault, while also maximizing the amount of counter-assaulting teams you have. So deploying your infantry correctly and in the right spot also means that when you inevitably fall back, you're not falling back off the objective. So you're defending in depth there. So that was just something I noticed with your game 3 there. But so solid matchups throughout the tournament for you. Solid games and solid opponents. I don't think you can ask for much more from a tournament.
No, and I do want to point out number mistake 2 that Tyson made that I took advantage of, and it really, in my opinion, finalized the game for the most part. When he dropped his ambush, he dropped it in the woods.
Ooh.
With my infantry about 6 or 8 inches away.
Ooh.
So my infantry just moved up to the side in the rear of the Martyrs and assaulted them in the woods.
Yes, I learned something that weekend. Martyrs do not have AA machine or pixel spigot machine, whatever they're called, the 360 machine guns. They are
forward firing
only. So you assault them from the rear, they are 16 points of useless tanks.
Yeah, I assaulted one and killed it outright. He rolled to come back, was only able to move one martyr into contact. I can't remember if he killed a guy or didn't kill a guy, but then I came back, swung. I didn't do anything to the martyr, but he failed to counterattack, and only one of them made it out of the woods. The other two were blown up because they failed their cross checks.
That'll do it for you. My games were much less interesting, I guess I should say. My first game, I am so sorry if you are listening, was against a young man that was playing Italians. That was an interesting game. I really enjoyed that game. He rolled almost every single Italian as the elite, which somewhat worried me. However, he took a really interesting way of building an Italian list, and to get more stuff on the table, what he did, there's a card the Italians can use which basically makes them reluctant trained.
Right.
Which I thought was a very interesting idea, because he had a lot of stuff for the amount of points we were playing. 2 artillery batteries, 2 88s, 3 infantry platoons, or maybe 4. I think it was 3. And then a mortar platoon, I want to say, as well. We rolled up with our selection. I attacked, he defended. I was playing Honey Stewarts against his Italian infantry, and I forget the mission, but I believe it was Bridgehead. Yes, it was Bridgehead, because I came at him from both sides. And I was able to attack him from both sides at the same time, so his 88s kind of had to focus on both sides. I was able to assault his artillery pretty easily, and then turns out reluctant infantry with a dead 1IC don't come back and assault very well, so I was able to push him off the objective before he was even able to roll for reserves. Yeah, that I was glad to see that he did better in his next 2 games, but reluctant troops, and this is the thing when you take Tally-Ho as well, they're basically reluctant. That 5 up on a last stand checks, but that's deadly in its own sense. But at least I get the 4 up in counter assaults. Rolling a 5 up for a counter assault is kind of not fair, honestly. Like, I'm glad that he was able to bring so much more stuff, and he had the artillery to deal with stuff. He had a lot of 88s, but once people closed with that list, that reluctant rating, even once he became elite, he wasn't able to stick around on the table, not run off the table, but where he wanted them to be on the table. So, an interesting first game. I like to see Italians on the table. I think they are an interesting force in the game. The Sevamontes are just ridiculous in my opinion. But it was a good first game. Unfortunately, playing the Honey Stewarts, I just try to get wins, and if I get an 8-1 or 7-2, that's great. However, I was only able to pull a 7-2 out of that game. Attrition worked its way up with me. My second game, and I think the reason why I didn't play you in round 3 was against the one and only Chris Jackson. Chris and I were basically running our list that we were bringing to Masters. So it was kind of a sneak peek for both of us. He rolled a Grenadier company with plenty of anti-tank guns. And I brought my Honey Stewarts with no template weapons. Actually, I had a 2-tube mortar stand, but that was it. Rolled up Bridgehead for that one as well with the attack defend. And Chris was able to put some minefields in a really good spot to keep me from flanking him. Bear that in mind, because that will come in my next story.
Okay.
Was able to basically force a frontal assault unless I wanted to go over minefields and tanks. And that's just not a very good idea sometimes. So I was able to do it, and through the sheer brute of Honey Stewart and some infantry, killed my infantry formation to the man, and killed most of my Honey Stewarts. I was able, however, to push him off the objective at the very end, netting myself a 6-3, which is kind of... doesn't give the full scope. If you could have gotten more victory points, I think Chris killed 9 platoons of mine that game. So a 6-3, a hard-fought 6-3 against Chris Jackson. And that, I think, is what pushed me and you out of contention for top table. My third game, however, was against a new guy I'd never played before, Timothy Haldon, sorry. And he was playing Soviets. And Timothy, because of your game, I have lost all fear for Russians, and not because you played it poorly. He did the best he could do. We rolled up attack in an attack, and he lost the who's the actual attacker role, so he had to defend, and he had to defend with a mixed Strelkovy company.
What mission?
I believe we were playing. Ooh, this is a good question. It's on a long table edge where it's a fair fight, so there's objectives on both sides, but the defender has reserves. I'd have to do some more research on that.
Gotcha.
But he was unable to bring almost anything. He brought his mortars, a SMG platoon, some Soviet Stuarts, and his KVs on the table, and he left a large platoon of T-34s off the table as his reserve.
Ooh. Yeah.
And I was just able to defend one objective and make him spread out the objectives. So his KVs were on one objective, and his Stuarts were kind of in the middle to swing either way, and his infantry and mortars held the other objective. And I pushed all my Honey Stuarts and infantry onto the one objective, and assaulted the SMG infantry, which couldn't do anything to my Stuarts. He actually was able to kill one in the assault, which pushed the game into turn 2. However, after turn 2, it was pretty much over. He killed one Honey Stuart, and we shook hands after that. I pushed him off the objective by killing every last stand on the objective. So,
wow.
That just is a really good study on how you have to build your force to be able to fight in reserves. And that mixed Soviet Tankovy is a really hard formation not to attack in all the time. If you are ever forced to defend with that formation, good luck, because it's challenging. And remember that story, because we'll come to that when we get to Masters. So
I think that's a good point you bring up. When you build the list, you got to think about what you're putting in reserve, because, with the new national point level at 109, I build lists and it's like, sweet, I can get a lot of anti-tank guns in. I'll just build a pack front. This looks great. And you're like, well, I have to defend with this list. What would I put in reserve? And you're like, well, if I put any of this in reserve, I'm now at a disadvantage against my opponent.
Yeah, you're limiting.
These pack guns aren't moving up.
You're limiting the strength of the list by having reserves. Which, I get it. That's the mechanic that you're supposed to deal with. The strategy behind it is how you mitigate that weakness that's built into the game. So, all in all, I thought Fallen was a success. I took home the Iron Man from winning first place the day before, and I was able to see a lot of people use those 20% off coupons at the Battlefront stall. So, all in all, I felt that Fallen, it wasn't even that cold, so couldn't ask for a better weekend.
Right. So, tell us how one becomes a Masters champion.
Well, you have to roll a lot of 6s. But other than that, you also have to win games. And I did a lot of winning this last year, and I was able to actually get an invite to the Masters tournament. In all seriousness, no. Lots of people are good enough to get to Masters.
Right.
And I see them in every tournament I go to, where people bring lists that I have no idea how to fight them, or people... I mean, I get rules sprung on me all the time where it's like, can't actually do that. It's like, oh, I thought you could. Oh, nope, turns out that's a version 3 or a Team Yankee rule. So, it's good to see that the game doesn't rely on the top 18 people. But getting to Masters, it was a 6-game tournament this year. With it was escalation, kind of. We had to have 3 different point totals, and moving into that tournament, I was able to basically recreate my honey list as a Crusader list with infantry support for the different point totals. I played Keith Gilmore in round 1, and here a plug for the mission selector. I mentioned in my after action with Mitch, the mission selector is really the strategy before the game, and it can set you up for success or it can set you up for failure. Now there's some tactic behind it, I do believe. Looking at your opponent's list, and you gotta, it's an educated guess about what they're going to choose, because they could have an infantry company, but I've seen people with infantry companies, cough cough Romanians, that choose attack against a tank formation to force those fair fights. It's a calculated risk, but if you can mitigate that risk, then it's a great choice. But that mission selector really enables you to build your list to do the things that you want it to do. I'm a huge proponent of the mission selector. I think it's a great addition to the game. Which, to say, we used that at Masters Tournament. So, first game against Keith Gilmore, chose attack against his defend, and it was a good game. It was a good warm-up game. I think everyone was kind of warming up. We actually had a lot of tied-out games that first round. Was able to squeak out a 6-3 against his defensive infantry. Turns out Germans are just really good at defending. Those pack guns are just so hard to dig out with that 3-up save. Moving past there into game 2, and tell me to slow down if you want me to, but we got to get through 6 games. So
yeah.
Game 2 was against Tom Mullane. Tom, another great player, also brought German infantry. He brought an Africa Corps list. And I say infantry, he actually brought the armored car formation. I was actually kind of surprised to see that he only brought 3 platoons of armored cars. So I thought it was going to be an easy game. Rush out there, kill the armored cars, and be done with it. I killed all of his armored cars. I was like, good game, Tom. I broke your formation. It was a great game. He's like, oh, no. My formation is still good. I've got an infantry platoon and this pack gun platoon. You still got to kill. So the game continues. And I was like, what? Oops, as his tank destroyers are looking at the back of my Honey Stewarts, which I just completely avoided to kill armored cars. So took a beating on that round of fire, and then was able to assault his infantry, destroy his infantry. He had 1 platoon from the formation, broke his company finally, but not before giving up 3 points for victory there. So another 6-3, which is not the best way to start Masters off. 2 wins, it's a good thing, but 6-3s are not going to set you apart from the competition, really.
Right.
Going into Game 3 that day, got my first rematch with Chris Jackson, who was sitting, we were tied. Basically, the winner of our game was probably going to take first for that first day. Chris chose to defend with his German infantry out of Iron Cross. My Honey Stewarts and Crusaders and infantry were in the attack. He got minefields. We played rear guard, I think, that day. His minefields, which really helped him that first time I was telling you about, and Fallen.
Right.
Well, he left a flank exposed this time, and so my Crusaders did what Crusaders do best. Flank. So I was able to get around his packed 40s and Stilgranat guns, get to their rear quarter. I was able to assault with no defensive fire, and I did something that does not happen very often to Chris Jackson, and that was a complete envelopment of his formation. So I was able to completely surround him 360 and was able to assault him piecemeal to get rid of his guns with no defensive fire, and I got to eradicate him off the objective. So that was a really good game. That was a 7-2, so finished the day just 4 points behind the points leader. 3 wins and points. The only undefeated players were myself and Ben Vanska. So looking at his list, I was really scared going into day 2 because I knew I was going to be playing him, and I knew I was going to be playing him in a points level that I really didn't want to. Soviet tanks at low points, which are just, they're scary. Especially because he was supporting them with infantry. So going into day 2, Ben surprised me. He actually brought an infantry formation. I thought he only brought tanks, but he brought an infantry formation supported by tanks, KVs, and Valentines, which are ridiculous tanks. He chose defend, I chose attack. He got reserves. By spreading the objectives out, I was able to push both objectives, keeping his Valentines spread out. It was just a race against the clock to see if I could push him off an objective before his scattered reserves of 4 KV-1s came on the table. And when I say race against the clock, we made it to turn 5 before I finally pushed him off, started to push him off the objective. Luckily for me, and unfortunate for Ben, his 4 KV-1s came on the complete wrong side of the table. So at that point, I think Ben was going to try to make a rush for the one objective that I left undefended and try to mop up points as he went. I was able to push him off the objective and grabbed a 7-2 that game. Unfortunately, I needed an 8-1 to be more than a point ahead of him, and I needed someone else to do well. No one else did well, so in a straight Swiss format, points match up. I was now 1 point ahead of Ben, and the next person down the line was 7 or 8 points behind Ben. So, got to rinse and repeat Game 5 against Ben. This time it was our 104 point lists, and looking at my list, Ben made the choice to defend again. I, of course, went with attack. We ended up, I believe, playing Breakthrough was our mission. Yes, Breakthrough. So he chose his corners. I got to deploy. The one thing that really saved him in our last game was my AT-7 against his front armor, side armor 6 just wasn't very useful. Even my AT-9 against his Valentines just wasn't very useful. With this game, I was able to bring my M10s at short range from the very beginning, so his Valentines did not last nearly as long. That game was over pretty quickly. I was able to just smash through his line before his KVs came on to do damage. Again, it was just a race. Like, I just had to get through his line to the objective before the KVs got there, because once the KVs got there, there's nothing that I can do to move him off the objective, even with M10s. He's just going to kill the M10s in a little bit. So, squeaked out another 7-2 off of that one. And for final table, it was me and Chris Jackson. So, a year ago, it was a similar situation. Myself and Chris playing for first. Chris could have just given up that game if he wanted to. I wasn't as far ahead. There was actually a mathematical way for Chris to tie, and then it would go to strength of schedule, and Chris had played me twice, so his strength of schedule may have won out. So it was basically, I just had to win the game to win Masters. But if I lost the game, it was going to be really tight, and Chris may have walked away with a second year as reigning champion. And it was really looking bad. I made a really big mistake. I was playing a tank-only list. No infantry, only vehicles. And he chose defend, I chose attack. And we were playing, what's that mission with strategic withdrawal? Fighting withdrawal?
It's named something else now. I can't think of the new name. I've always thought about it as strategic withdrawal.
Yeah, it's basically that. So he gets everything on the table, and starting turn 2, he has to take stuff off. He's just got to make it till turn 9. and we were turning through turns real quick, and he was pulling stuff off the table, and it came down to I just had to machine gun an infantry platoon in his HQ out of an objective because I had put the objective right by a building.
Oh, no.
It was a huge mistake on my part. I could not believe I did it, but I did it, so I had my whole army sitting around a building, machine gunning, 50 caling, just anything I could to kill the infantry, and I got the infantry platoon down to testing. I got his tank 7 Montes that he had down to testing. So it came down to turn 9. Chris had won the game. But before you check for victory conditions, you check formation. You check your formation. So he had to do all of his tests. And he had his HQ, the SEVs, and the infantry platoon. That was all he had left. So he tests the SEVs. He's just got to roll a 3+. He rolled a 2. So the one SEV runs off the table.
Right.
Have no fear. He's still got the HQ with the infantry platoon. The infantry platoon rolls its test. He's just got to roll a 3 for a last man standing. It's all Africa Corps infantry. Rolls a 1. Don't worry. The HQ will save the day. HQ reroll. Rolls a 2. His formation breaks. Turn 9. Having successfully defended for 9 turns with strategic withdrawal. I had already written the table off. I was already putting my models away, and we had thought the game was over, and then we remembered the order of precedence. You gotta test your formation first, and I was like, there's no way Chris is gonna roll 3 dice and roll 1 and 2 3 times. It's just not gonna happen.
Heck, getting to turn 9 in 2.5 hours is a feat on its own.
Oh, some of our turns were over in like 3 minutes. That's something that, if you get that mission, I think it's beholden on the attacker to make sure that you get to 9 rounds. So if that requires you taking some very aggressive short turns, I think that it's beholden on the attacker to do that.
Yeah.
But we got there, and I thought I had lost the game because of a mistake. And then when Chris graciously handed me a 7-2, an 8-1, he actually didn't kill anything off of I got an 8-1 that game. Handing me the 8-1 for the win at Masters, that was it was just breathtaking. I started hyperventilating. I'm pretty sure I had to go chug a Coke that I had to buy from the front desk. But taking Masters at my second time against the man who took it away from me the year before and relegated me to second, I was pretty happy with it. And my plaque is sitting above my computer desk so that I can sit here and look at it. So
there you go.
But yeah, that's Masters. It's a fun time, fun games, challenging games. That they really are, the people that get invites to Masters really are some of the best players in our game for the year. So I encourage anyone that really wants to challenge themselves, go to tournaments, win tournaments, go to Masters, and see what you can do. While they're great players, we all make mistakes. Maybe you'll get an objective put in a house with an all-tank force, or misplace a minefield to give up a game, or have infantry that just can't hold out against tanks. It's just an interesting time. But that was Masters. And
again, congratulations for winning. That's definitely no easy feat.
Yeah, for a 6-0 sweep, I was that was what shocked me the most. Like, I thought there was a chance that I could win, but I did not think there was a chance that I could win 6-0. Like, that's, to me, is going 3-0 at a 3-game tournament. You can do that. That's doable. But 6-0, I did not expect that going into it. So
yeah.
But so enough talk about our tournaments. Let's talk about some tactics for a new unit that's coming out.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of questions in regards to the Ferdinand. How do you use it in defense? How do you use it in attack? How do you deal with it when you're attacking it? And how do you deal with it when it's attacking you?
The Ferdinand is going to be a really interesting I won't say meta changer because Mitch is listening, but it's going to be a game changer when it's on the table. It's basically the Tiger tank that Germans should have gotten when version 4 released. Cheap enough that you can put it on the table, but not too expensive that you can't put anything else with it.
Yeah.
It's got the front armor that's going to scare people. It's got the gun that's going to put the fear of Jesus in people. It's just all around going to be a great tank.
You know, I think right now, if we were to play Flames with some of our listeners, so many people in our community, you would win the game by just placing the Ferdinand on the table. And I'm not saying that they're not fielding things that can kill it. I think people have overhyped it so much in their own heads that just seeing the Ferdinand on the table, they've already will wave the white flag and adjust the way they play that'll cause them to lose the game. For example, for me to use the Ferdinand, I would prefer to use it in defense. And I think taking anything more than one Ferdinand is a waste of points.
I agree. Taking more than one Ferdinand is just an overkill of points, and it's something that you could use to better yourself. Because think about it, for the same points, you can bring 4 martyrs.
Right. So, my thoughts on it would be, if I'm defending with it, I'm placing it center table.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to have it pretty much snipe out the heavy AT that's coming at me, and then I can move it towards the objective that it's going after. I feel like I have to have an infantry platoon that essentially makes kind of a U or a C in front of the Ferdinand to guard it.
Yep.
Now, the smart play for most players is going to be to ignore the Ferdinand. And to that, I would say there's a way you can kind of trick your opponent to go after the Ferdinand when they really shouldn't be doing that. For example, maybe I have it in the center table. Maybe I have it start to move forward a little. Maybe I let its sides get exposed and try to force the enemy to focus on the Ferdinand, which will allow my martyrs to clean up. I really think that the key for the Ferdinand to be successful is to get the opponent to focus on that so the other stuff can do the work. You know, the national point level is 109 points. So with one Ferdinand, I have 92 points of support I can take with my Ferdinand. Is how I look at it.
I think you're looking at it the right way. Effectively, it is the center focal point of your list. And the rest of the list should be built around supporting the Ferdinand. Because the Ferdinand's what's going to kill Churchills and KVs and KV-1Ss and all of these heavy tanks. It's just going to evaporate them.
Yes.
With impunity. However, you can still get an infantry assault on it and kill it. You can still push it back. You can still push it off an objective. So you're absolutely right. You know, you've got to you buy a Ferdinand, you better have a platoon of grenadiers to sit there with it, to babysit it. And that's just the way it's going to have to go, because I don't even think the Ferdinand has a machine gun.
It does not, and its motivation rating is reluctant. So it's not going to survive very long in assault if it's assaulted. But I really think that experienced players are going to make sure that it doesn't get assaulted. You're going to have either armored cars or infantry support with it. And I think that most players are going to support their flanks to not allow something to get to its flank. But I really think a tactic that I will use, and I know that people are going to use this against me now, I may dangle the Ferdinand up a little just so you get a little more aggressive and attempt to get a side shot, and then that will allow my martyrs to clean up. One thing I'll say, the difference in the Tiger and the Ferdinand is I took a Tiger to a 60-point tournament. It was a low-point tournament. I said, hey, the Tiger will kick butt. Throughout the entire tournament, the Tiger never got its points back.
Yeah.
I think the Ferdinand can get its points back in a single game.
Absolutely.
As long as people aren't ignoring it. I mean, if you put it in the center and have it, snipe out the enemy tanks and then move towards the objective your opponent's focusing on, I think you get your points back there. But I really feel like the Ferdinand on defense The key is to make sure that your opponent over focuses on it, so you can use your other stuff to make your money.
And you bring up a good point with defense. Like I think you're right. The Ferdinand is going to be a great defensive asset. That's the double-edged sword, though, because when you choose defend, you are giving up 40% of your force.
Right.
So now you've got to defend 2 objectives that could be on either edge of the table. And you bring up the good point with putting the Ferdinand in the middle. If you ever play a heavy tank or a Tiger, always put it in the middle. Never put it on one side of the table, because then I'm just going to go to the other side of the table.
Yeah.
But with you choosing defend, you're giving up 40% of your force, or playing strategic withdrawal. You're giving up troops to take that choice. And with Germans, it's a tough choice. What are you going to give up? And now if you're putting your Ferdinand in the middle with its dedicated defense of an infantry platoon, now what are you putting on the objectives? So, you were saying that people had hyped up the Ferdinand, and it's a good tank. I'm not trying to bash the Ferdinand here. But taking stuff like the Ferdinand or the Tiger is a risk, because if you defend, or if you get defended, if you get forced to defend, those are going to be hard choices, and you're not going to be able to support both objectives against an infantry list that just is able to rush a lot of stuff against you. Against L640, it's just going to rush a lot of stuff up against your infantry. So it's difficult. It's not impossible. It's just difficult, and it's something to think of as the German player who wants to take these really awesome guns in a defensive list. So absolutely put your Ferdinands in the middle, see where you're going to need them, and then move accordingly. Focus fire, and don't take more than one. I think taking more than one just gives up. You're giving up points at that point in time.
Yeah.
Now using it aggressively, using it in the attack, I think is going to be another challenge in and of itself, and honestly, I think the harder of the two. Because attacking, you've got a really awesome long range, but there's always going to be something in the way, which means you're going to have to move. Mm-hmm. And if you have to move, you're going from 2 shots down to 1 shot. And I can't tell you how many times I drop a dice looking for a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6 even, and the dice just disappoint you. So attacking with the Ferdinand, you've got to be really smart about where you put it, because where you put it is effectively where it's going to be the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think for attack, you kind of have to deploy in an opposite thought process as you would for defend. You're going to have your 2 objectives. You're going to have to sit there at the beginning of the game before you even start deploying and go, I'm going after that objective. You place the Ferdinand on that side. And this will help it avoid the flank shots, because you can just march it up on the one side and not worry about flank shots on that one side. But then you're limited to just one half of the table. And you brought up a good point. You're not getting 1 shot per turn. You could always blitz, fire, shoot, and scoot, but then you're only moving 8 inches
at most
a turn. It would be good for busting up KVs, Churchills, anything less than that. Really, it's overkill in the attack. I'd rather have more like Panzer IIIs. Yep. So I really feel like the Ferdinand is going to be a defensive unit, and if it's attacking you and you have to defend against it, just hope that your opponent makes a mistake and it comes too far forward. He doesn't have anything that's going to be able to provide defensive fire and just spring into action.
Into action, and also pray your opponent makes a mistake. If he's assaulting with it, if he's going to try to use the Ferdinand, remember it's reluctant. So something to always remember: when you are counter assaulting, you use the worst rating for counter assault. So if that Ferdinand's involved in the assault, Germans are now counter assaulting on a 5. So just something to keep in mind when you're playing against these things. A good tank, do not value it, but at the same time, don't overestimate what it's going to be able to do, because while it's an awesome unit, it's a single tank, and single tanks don't do very much in a game where you can bring 30 tanks to a table.
Yeah. I originally, when the Ferdinand came out, was like, I have to take this tank. I have to take it. It's going to be amazing. This is what's going to solve my AT issues with my L640 list.
Well, you are a big cat lover, so...
Well, the problem, though, is I can't take the Ferdinand with my L640 list unless I take the L640 as my main formation and Ferdinand's a company of them as allied formation, and it's just such a point sink that it ruins what the L640
but now
stand
you're breaking
for.
rule number 1, which is never take more than one Ferdinand.
Yeah, so... will I play with the Ferdinand? Maybe. I like the Lukes, but they're double the cost of an L640 at 2 points, and I think I'm gonna stick with the L640s.
I was doing the point cost analysis on the looks, and the looks, for what you get, you can bring the armored cars, upgrade the guns for no additional cost, and get effectively the same platoon for half. Oh, not even half. It was like a third of the cost. So you can bring 9 armored cars with a lot of the same AT that you'd get from 3 looks. And I think that's the way to go for that one.
Yeah, the looks are a lot more survivable. But they're just double the points of L640. I prefer to keep my L640s, and if I ever had to play against the Ferdinand, one option I've been looking at here recently is the Stuka Tank Hunter.
The Stuka Tank Hunter is a very good option for dealing with the Ferdinand. And you know what's another great option that people have completely forgotten about in version 4? Direct fire smoke.
Yeah, it's a direct. I haven't seen anybody use direct fire smoke. I think since version. Well, rephrase that. I haven't seen it used in version 4 mid war. I have seen it version 4 late war. Right. Bill White used it against me a few times, but other than that, I have yet to see it get used.
That's a very effective, and especially a lot of the allied tanks have direct fire smoke. You have this option, and people are so focused, I think, on killing assets that I really think that people have forgotten that direct fire smoke, now that Ferdinand, A, can only see 6 inches, but if he wants to move, he's either A, got to take a chance at a blitz, which, I get it, it's a 3+, but Germans roll 1s and 2s all the time, too. He's got to take the chance on the blitz, or he's just giving up a shot. And if I'm losing 1 tank per turn to the Ferdinand, those are casualties that anyone can take. Even if you're losing Shermans or Churchills. A chance at 1 per turn is a whole lot better than a guaranteed 1 per turn, possibly 2 per turn.
Right.
So, direct fire smoke. Don't forget about that, people. But, before we get carried away and hype this up all night, there are some events coming up that we wanted to let you all know about.
The weekend coming up, we have a slew of Toys or Tots tournaments. You go to the Flames website and you click on, it's on the front page, their Toys for Tots schedule. You can see where all the games are. There are a ton of Toys for Tots tournaments going on.
There are, from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South. They're everywhere. Come out and support a great organization. Have some fun doing it. All of these entry fees for this tournament are you just bring an unwrapped toy and you bring that, and that's your entry fee for your tournament. Ed and myself are going to be at the Toys for Tots tournament in Fredericksburg, which is going to 125 points, right?
125 points mid-war. That is a lot. It is a lot of points. And
I'll be there with my Churchill formation, Ed, so I don't know what you're planning on bringing, but now everyone knows what I'm playing.
My L640s will struggle against the Churchills, but maybe I won't see them, right?
Maybe, there's always the chance. So, just look it up, see if there's anything close in your area, and go out and have a good time this holiday season. But again, bringing it up, ask us questions. We love to hear from you guys. We'll definitely put this up a forum for it so people can get their questions that they have coming in. We already have the next one rolling up. So get your questions in, and we'll get you in line. And with that, we'll send it back to Sean in the studio. For myself and Ed Sales, have a happy holidays this year.
Yep, have a good one.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.